today, Gareth Wheeler, we're going to talk about Toronto FC because they are literally, just as we begin taping this show, finished their postseason locker cleanout day, their media availability, and there were a few things that we can get into. One, the fact that next to nobody was there for the media availability, and that says a lot, and I'm sure you have a lot to say about it. But also the narrative going into this, Gareth, which was the season was objectively a failure. Not many things, if any, went right. So we kind of went into this wondering what we were going to hear. What could John Herdman or Bill Manning or any of the staff from TFC say that would make supporters feel better at all? So now that we've heard from the protagonists at TFC, some might think they're the antagonists right now. What were your main takeaways from Media Day?
Well, let's go step by step here. First off, doing a locker cleanout 20 days after they kick the final ball, something doesn't seem right about that, which leads into the bigger conversation. I think rather than what was said by this disappointing team, it was who was actually listening. And that turned out to be the story today with Neil Davidson from the Canadian Press, who does a great job covering Toronto FC and Canadian soccer, put out a photo of him in a room with 2 cameras and our good friend John Molinaro sitting front and center. Those were the only 2 quote unquote media people that were able to attend this press conference. There's been a lot of shock, a lot of anger based upon that. The fact that things have, to a lot of people's opinions, slipped to this level and fallen off the cliff this much. I look at things a different way. Our very own Oliver Platt put it out there on Twitter that it's hard to fathom, having covered the team for so many years before, that it would come to something like this with this little attention. It's very easy for me to fathom. I absolutely understand why. And if you haven't been paying attention to what's been going on in the media, especially sports media industry in this country, well, you simply haven't been paying attention, because the industry continues to shrink and shrink and shrink. And soccer is just one of the casualties of this. It's happened really across the board in a lot of different sports. Just ask yourself out there, how many people in this country earn a living, earn a paycheck covering the game of soccer in this country, and that being their predominant source of income? Outside of One Soccer, we're trying to build something, provide an outlet here with this station. But outside of that, you can probably count the people that are journalists who earn a living covering the game of soccer in this country on one hand, and you might not even use every finger to do so. Why is this? Well, there's a lot of different culprits. There's a lot of different reasons. Corporate downsizing is a massive one. There's been CRTC complaints and discussions. It's above my pay grade and not for me to talk about, but it's free information that's being put out and reported by outlets that are out there right now. Quite frankly, there isn't enough opportunity in the Canadian sports media market, and especially around the game of soccer. And that's what is exceptionally disappointing as we continue to try to grow the game in this country. There is an opportunity for hardworking individuals to tell those stories on a regular basis and earn a living from doing that. Mark Noonan said at the Canadian Premier League press conference, he said, we need to cover our own league. And that's what's kind of happened here. Now, the media do show up for big events, things that really matter. That's kind of where the resources go now. So does this, a press conference or a locker cleanout 20 days after from this team, fit the bill as a big event? Not in their eyes. Like, the season's in the rearview mirror. It happened so long ago. There's so much that has happened over the course of 20 days. If you want to get people out there to take it seriously, the club needs to take it seriously as well. And that's the reason for me. I just don't think that they really care. It's been a bad news story and a bad news situation for this team. I don't think they want to magnify that anymore. Hence why this locker cleanout is happening 20 days later. I do think that corporate communications, soccer communications in this country need to step up their game. They make it difficult to cover this game, unnecessarily so at times, just in terms of timing of the press conferences, like media availability being overnight. Outside from maybe the Vancouver Whitecaps, who do a great job at this, don't provide match notes for people that cover the team. Not enough information, no coordination in terms of when events were playing. Like, a couple of weekends ago, we had a Canadian Premier League final on the same day where Christine Sinclair was playing her 4th final game with the Canadian women's national team. Yet you're asking the media to show up to one event or the other. There needs to be better coordination here and to allow these limited forms of coverage to be able to actually go out there and cover the team. And look, TFC, I mean, I used to help provide coverage for the club. What is the commitment to coverage being over the course of the season? And it's a difficult one when you're losing and you might not want to be in the spotlight, but your fans need an outlet. If the traditional media just don't have the resources or don't deem it to be priority to go on and cover the sport, and the bloggers and people out there that provide content on podcasts, they're doing what they can, but you know what? 10 a.m. on a Friday afternoon or Friday morning, a lot of people are working. They have things to do. And unfortunately, there was no advantage to having a potential live stream to actually hear what the players were saying as well. And that's something that was always the case with Toronto FC, but wasn't today. And finally, just on the team itself, I mean, it ended with such a thud. It was such a difficult season. Even the players addressed it today. They weren't together. The communication with the public was spotty at best. That relationship, it waned this year. And you had a head coach that decided for whatever reason to just come in and manage one game at the end of the season. I mean, how much more is there to ask? Probably not much. So when you're looking at the priorities, a locker cleanout 20 days later doesn't really fit the bill to an event that it's like, everyone look at us, everyone pay attention. And so you end up with a situation like today. The optics don't look good. Things need to improve across the board. There is no question about that. But in a difficult industry at this time, it makes it a challenge to provide adequate coverage at the best of times.
And we even see it you can stretch across sports in different ways. That was fantastic. That's going to make Jordan's answer so much easier. He's going to be able to pick up on that. But we even saw last night, like there's a vibe from social media or digital communications. And that is a lot of the professional communications and professional relations now, where the Edmonton Oilers are not doing particularly well in the NHL. They didn't even post the final score graphic because they knew that the replies to it would be so toxic, so negative, that the strategy is we're going to pretend like it didn't happen, which is a little bit silly. And we did hear from TFC. They did put out their roster update in a tweet about a week ago on a website or a post on their website, Jordo. But and you're still learning the media game here, when there's bad news or news that you don't necessarily want a ton of attention, we call it the Friday evening news dump. We're going to put it out at like 4:57 on a Friday so that all the journalists are going to go and not have time to make it into newscasts. They're not going to be as willing to cover it. It sort of gave us that vibe today. Do you think that's probably what happened here, is the team didn't want as much coverage from this post-season post-mortem?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's one of those things you probably want to forget. But I think you needed to bite the bullet, or the club needed to bite the bullet. And I think a season like TFC had was abysmal, but you have to deal with it, right? The good and the bad. When everyone was singing and dancing and 2016 was happening and TFC could do no wrong and all the players were rowing in the right direction, everyone was celebrating. You have to go with the lows as well. There are too many things that have happened with this club, specifically throughout the end of the season, where it's just like, it's not good enough. Now, you have your press conference, you're focusing towards the next season. I guess my biggest question to both of you gentlemen, and I'll chime in as well, is where does TFC go from here? Like, how does next season, is it going to be a promising season based off on the back of what has happened the past 12 months, you could say, with this club? We can go further, but we'll just focus on the past year and the past season. I'm not optimistic. I'll be the first one to apologize or bite my tongue if it ends up being a successful season going into 2024. But Wheels, correct me if I'm wrong, I just can't see how that is going to happen based on what we've already seen, the club and players that they have, and the direction that they're going. I don't want to kick them on the down, but tell me the limelight. Tell me if there's a glimmer of hope that I'm missing.
Well, the glimmer of hope is that some of these players completely underachieved, and John Herdman and his staff, much like they did with the men's national team, hope that and believe that they can get more to this group. And I think that is very much to be determined, but there's reason to think that, yeah, they can get more to this group. The one thing that was said today, really quickly, was Sean Johnson, Jonathan Osorio both alluded to maybe a lack of togetherness in the room amongst the players. And that's a tough look, considering on the other side of the coin, you had Insigne and Bernardeschi saying, well, they're committed to staying. I think Insigne threw a number 300% committed to next season, because they're not moving on, because there's no chance that the club is going to bite the bullet and write a massive check for them to go away. But weren't they part of the reason why there was the disconnect in behind closed doors? So something needs to change from that perspective. You have two sides of the coin. Clearly the comments made by Johnson and Osorio, I don't think that they were put in a vacuum. They weren't to the younger players or more anonymous players in the team. There was a clear divide, and a lot of that comes from the two most expensive players in the team. So that's going to have to be resolved. And if they stay, which it looks and sounds like they will, it's up to Herdman to work his magic and try to get much, 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 much more out of them.
And I think just before we move on to sort of wrap it up, that's probably why the three of us and many others who do pay attention and do cover these teams, and it's not just TFC, of course, it's the Whitecaps, it's CF Montreal. We'd love to see an Eastern Conference final next year. That's Montreal, Toronto, and Vancouver defeating LAFC in the West. We want these successful stories, but when it doesn't go that way, in these, if you're going to go out and bring Lorenzo Insigne in front of a microphone, bring John Herdman there, isn't that not John Herdman's bread and butter? The hype rah-rah speech, everything's going to be better. Don't let everyone fester for 20 days wondering what's next and just feel low. 20 days, like that, bring them out. Say, this was my first game. This is what I learned. I can't give you the full plan yet because it's not made, but this is a plan. Here's a reason to stay with us over the offseason. We promise news will come, and just give them that little bit of hope. We do have to move on, though.
Yeah, just. I'm not trying to slate our industry because there's so many people that their hearts are in the right places. Everyone wants more opportunity. We want to have the resources to cover more teams, tell more stories, and provide more coverage. It's a real challenge right now in Canada. And it's something that we need to build towards and hopefully grow this organically. Because if we don't do it, I'm not sure who is.